Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Supplement. Coming up on today's show, Daniel Levy calls a truce with Mauricio Pochettino amid rumours that his manager was about to walk away from White Hart Lane. It's Mane v Klopp as the Liverpool forward clashes with his manager over that late substitution in the 3-0 win at Burnley last night. And in a week when Bury finally go out of business, what lessons can the sport learn from their demise? Here to talk about all that and much more, Martin Samuel is Chief Sports Writer at the Daily Mail. Simon Mullock is Chief Football Writer at the Sunday Mirror. And Matt Law is the football news correspondent at the Telegraph. Morning, chaps. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us this morning. Don't forget to tweet the show at Sunday Sup. The best will appear on screen over the next 90 minutes. Let's have a flick through the papers then this morning. The Sunday People. Sadio Mane, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. What was going on between Mane, Klopp and Mo Salah yesterday at Turf Moor. Not a good start to the morning for Unai Emery ahead of the North London derby. Emmanuel Petit, the former Arsenal midfielder, labels him clueless over his team selections. He'll hope to get it right this afternoon against Tottenham. You blew it. That's the Sunday People's football pullout this morning. Chelsea 2-0 up at Stamford Bridge yesterday. They drew 2-2 with Sheffield United. Paul Pogba, if he thought he was going to get away before the European transfer deadline tomorrow, he was wrong. That deal is off, according to the Sunday Mirror this morning. That's Simon's story. Sam Wallace, his column this morning in the Sunday Telegraph, written with conviction and authority as ever. Bobby Duncan, his agent, they're wrong to go public with their claims, their bullying claims. That's Sam's column. We'll talk about that in part 3 of today's programme. Bury as well will be at the top of part 3, I fear, for our game. That's Gareth Southgate, the England manager, talking about Bury's demise this morning. That's the back of the Sun. Ollie Holt on the same subject. £10,000 for a parking space at Bury. What's all that about? We'll tell you a little bit later on. That's Ollie's column this morning. Southgate and his England squad, which was announced on Thursday. Southgate shows his ruthless side. Kyle Walker, the Manchester City right back, axed from that England squad. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. The first subject, though, is Tottenham Hotspur, and we'll talk about Graham Souness in his column this morning. It's always incisive, it's always razor sharp, and it certainly is this morning. He's talking about Tottenham, Mauricio Pochettino and Daniel Levy. He says, let's take the gloves off, Martin, when it comes to Tottenham. Surprisingly, Graham, I think, has always got the gloves off whenever he talks or whenever he writes in the Sunday Times. But he says, you can talk about people being hard to deal with, but Daniel Levy, the bottom line is, they've still won nothing under him since he took over as the Tottenham chairman. That has to change. What's going on at that football club? Because Mauricio Pochettino talked extensively before this game against Arsenal today, talking on Friday about his own future, the talks he's had with Daniel Levy to try to resolve their differences. Why so early in the season, and what's this all about?
Well, it's carried on from last season, hasn't it? I mean, I haven't been to a... I don't go to too many press conferences, but I haven't been to any with Mauricio Pochettino for about 6 months, 5 months, where it hasn't all been about him and his future and everything like that. And when it isn't, it sort of becomes, he finds some way that it becomes about that as well, and it's all very puzzling. I can't remember who it was this morning that wrote. Was it Robbie Fowler that wrote that it's like becoming like Mourinho? It's becoming somebody compared Pochettino with Mourinho, with this sort of air of dissatisfaction that there is around him. And you know, you were there the other day with Manchester City when they got a great result, and he came out and he was buzzing or whatever. But then 2 or 3 days later, you'll read you'll read quotes from Mauricio and there's this air of dissatisfaction again, and it's unhelpful. It's unfortunate and it's unhelpful. We all know what Tottenham have done. It's been a fantastic project. You go to that ground, it's an astonishing ground. And that sort of stuff comes at a price, and they have made mistakes in the transfer market in past seasons where they've gone very late or they haven't done nothing and they haven't done anything in the transfer market. And the team hasn't grown. But really, it's not bad being Tottenham manager. I mean, it hasn't been bad for Mauricio Pochettino to be the Tottenham manager under Daniel Levy. It's a very, very well-run club with flaws, as they've all got. But he doesn't seem happy.
Version 6, as he talked about on Friday, Simon, should he have built a trophy-winning football team? Whatever the discipline, whatever trophy that is, whichever one you care to choose, should they be competing for the honours?
Well, they got to the Champions League final last year, which is an achievement in itself. Let's not underestimate the how big that was. Obviously, they lost to Liverpool, but yeah, I think he's got to now put a trophy on the sideboard. You know, it's all very well talking about finishing in the top 4, and again, a huge achievement for Tottenham to do that. What is it, 3 seasons in succession? But fans like trophies. They like to see silverware. They like to see the captain climb up the steps and lift a trophy. And yeah, I think Pochettino now he's got to put one of those trophies on the sideboard. I was with Spurs in Singapore during the summer, and Pochettino had already spoken that, you know, if Spurs had won in Madrid last year, then he would have left the club, which I thought was a really strange thing to say. And then on the day that the club signed a new sponsorship deal with AIA, he comes out and says, well, you know, I'm not really a manager, I'm a coach, I don't have any say over the transfers, I don't have any say over the contracts. If you want to speak about those, then ask Daniel Levy. And it just seems that he's kind of he's got this bee in his bonnet, certainly over control in the transfer market, and it's something that both Daniel Levy and Pochettino have to resolve.
Matt, how did you analyse the meeting between Daniel Levy and Mauricio Pochettino? Because let's face facts, the training ground, we know their offices are next door to each other, so they can pop in at any time and say, actually, we need a word. But dinner suggests something far more serious, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he made the point, in actual fact, they did meet before the dinner at the training ground. So it sounds like they met at the training ground and then resolved to, actually, let's go for dinner and sort of have this out properly. It sounded all very good-natured. He was insistent the personal relationship is fine and has always been fine. And yet the professional relationship, they've been sort of tugging in 2 different directions for the past couple of summers now, you get the feeling. I mean, Pochettino made quite a good point in the Sunday papers today that I think he wants to regenerate this squad. He admitted that at the end of last season, the last months of last season, he saw in the Premier League that the squad would dip in. And they ended up focusing on the Champions League, and he ended up putting everything into that. But he could see in the Premier League they were dipping, and he's concerned about that. And you can see signs of it this season as well. And he made the point that if you look as a case study at the first game that Klopp played as manager at Liverpool at Tottenham in 2015, I think there's 3 of the 18 still at Liverpool. At Tottenham there's about 10. There's not been a regeneration or a churn. And as much as the problem is of signing players, they haven't sold players. They're not. The squad has actually got quite old together. And it has started to feel stale, and he's wanted to shake that up. And I think he's felt that he's been denied that chance a little bit.
It's hard to sell players in London. It's hard to sell players in London because people like living in London.
Yeah.
You know, that you look at... I was with your guy. I was with Steve Parish at Crystal Palace. Yeah, it was your team. And he said that. He said it's harder to get people off the books than anything else because, you know.
Well, you've got Charlton, Millwall, AFC
but you know, people like living in London. You know, foreign players like living in London, and you say, well, you know, you've got this option here and this option there. I go, no, we'd rather stay where we are. And Tottenham might have the same problem.
Yeah. Tottenham have definitely found that, and that's created an issue for Pochettino because he just hasn't been able to regenerate his squad at all.
He has brought in players though, and Ndombele. I wouldn't take issue with Graham Souness face to face or in a dark alley, I must admit, but from the safety of the studio right now, I'm going to, because he talks about Ndombele and says this is a player they've signed for the future with the possibility of an enhanced transfer value later on down the line, someone they're nurturing. The transfer fee is around, say, £64 million. Have we really entered an era where Tottenham Hotspur are buying £64 million footballers with an eye on the future? Because my argument would be it's still at 64 million. That's the finished. You've bought pedigree there. You must have bought pedigree because otherwise,
there's certainly no guarantee with him though, isn't it? He hasn't been playing for a club. He's been playing in the Champions League, but he hasn't been playing for a club that's been winning loads of titles and winning Champions Leagues, and he hasn't got that experience. So there's still a case of you're still buying someone who needs grooming and needs
potential. 64 million
you're still buying potential there.
Pochettino said that to us. If you remember after the Man City game, he said we bought.
How much was Rodri at Man City?
He was 70-odd million, wasn't he?
I think nearer 60.
60.
So for an extra 64 million pounds against
Yeah, but you've got
60
the
million
wages
pounds, you
and
get the
everything
finished
else
article
going
with
into
Man
that.
City and Rodri, but here you get potential.
But also, I mean, if you look at their
Same
business,
player.
though, they've got in him who I would argue is potential, good potential. They've brought in Lo Celso, who's definitely only potential on loan in the end. And they've got Ryan Sessegnon, who's a kid from Fulham, who's not going to get in their team for
And
a
the lad
while.
that went back to Leeds.
And the lad who's gone back to Leeds on loan, who now can't get in the Leeds team.
No.
And people have talked about a great summer for Tottenham. I'm not so sure at all, to be honest with you. I'm not sure at this moment their team from the summer is any better than what it was last season.
Different, but not good.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Is there a sensitivity? Is it heightened because they drew at Man City? They drew at Man City somehow, but they did.
Well,
Good, an excellent result. But then the following weekend, we're at White Hart Lane, and they somehow contrived to lose at home to Newcastle.
Well, I've seen Spurs twice this season. Opening day against Villa, when they left it really late before winning the game. They went behind. They've been behind in all 3 games this season, which in itself is a worry. You know, the first 2 games that they got decent results. A win against Villa with 3 late goals. They could have lost 4 or 5-2 at the Etihad. They were really lucky to get off the hook there. And then last week against Newcastle, really struggled to break down a Newcastle team that's supposed to be in crisis. So yeah, I mean, it's a huge game today at the Emirates, given the fact that Tottenham's record there is pretty miserable. I think they've only won 1 time at the Emirates in the Premier League. So huge day for Pochettino today, because losing North London derby after this sort of uncertainty that's been over the club over the last few days, then a drama maybe becomes a crisis.
Did you sense on Friday when you saw Pochettino, Matt, that things were starting to unravel, or did you feel that the conversation that Levy and Pochettino had resolved matters? Is this a short-term problem, or is it deeper than that?
It's a problem that could come back. There was a different feel about it. It felt like he, and certainly the club, wanted to now start to draw a line under the summer, and I don't expect him to have to kind of go public with the same kind of things he was going over this summer.
Very unusually, one of their directors was in attendance at on Friday, Donna Cullen, which is those days are in the past of Donna being at a Tottenham press conference. They are long gone.
She wasn't at the press conference. I think she was at the dinner.
Sorry, at the dinner.
Which made me think the dinner was very much about communication and what was being said in public, because as we know, Donna's field at Tottenham for a long time before she became a director was head of communication. So I got the feeling that she was there to talk about, well, this is how your words come across. This is what's ended up being reported, because this is the feeling that it's bringing about. But it felt like he wanted to draw a line on it. The European transfer window, which he's made clear has been a problem for him because his players could still go, that's coming on to an end on Monday. It felt like it was now a case of, OK, we've had it out. They know where I was coming from. I'm listening to them about why maybe my communication was leading to negativity around the club. Let's go again.
If they were looking at it from a PR point of view, for want of a better phrase, that's the biggest issue, because it makes everything at Tottenham look in some way as if it's not permanent. When you've got this fabulous stadium, you've got this where they've established themselves as a Champions League club, which is very, very hard to do in this country, because we've got six elite teams and 4 places, whereas if you can establish yourself as a Champions League club in Germany quite comfortably, quite easily. It's very hard over here, and they've done it, and they've got this stadium, and everything should be right. This is us. This is where we are. This is their club now. And yet every single time Pochettino says something and starts talking about his future, it all seems as if it could disappear. Any minute, basically, and they would be looking for another manager, and then if they get it right, it's okay, and if they don't, they're back behind Arsenal again and stuff.
Yeah. Okay, we need to talk a little bit about Arsenal. They've got their manager, and clearly they believe he is the man to take them back into the top 4. I know that Unai Emery is an internet sensation these days with the dugout cam, but Emmanuel Petit has been pretty uncharitable this morning about some of his team selections and the way that he handles his squad. But where are Arsenal in terms of the pecking order as they go into this North London derby today?
I think given the problems that we've seen at Chelsea and Man United, then Arsenal have got to fancy themselves as possible top 4 candidates. I certainly think they'll be challenging. I saw them
Even
at
after Liverpool last.
I saw them at Liverpool. I thought there was kind of signs there that he's kind of developing a pretty decent team. Certainly in terms of attacking threat. I thought Pepe showed signs that he could be a real handful for Premier League defenders. But yeah, I think Arsenal are in a position where they can kind of thrive on the fact that other teams are going through a rebuilding process as well, who'll be challenging for the top 4. So I think it's a bit harsh of Petit sort of describing the Arsenal manager in that way, but
yeah.
you know, again, they're a team in flux, really.
I think there's real pressure on Emery this season. I think that with what the resources they had, I think the board have delivered as well as they could have done for him, probably. And I think, like you say, there'll be a realisation within that board that there's a lot of clubs now sort of in transition. This is a real opportunity for us to get back in the top 4. I think he's got to deliver top 4, otherwise I think he'll be out. It's
come to something, I think, Martin, shows how things change, that it feels like today's a Tottenham story, come what may. Would you agree?
No, I don't. Not having been at Liverpool last week and seen Arsenal once again swept off the park, really, certainly in the second half. But I think that this is another Leicester season. Apart from it's not to do with whether a team from outside can win the league. I think everyone outside Liverpool and Manchester City are very, very vulnerable this season. And that includes Arsenal. That includes, to a lesser extent, Tottenham, but it certainly includes Arsenal. Tottenham certainly includes Chelsea. And Manchester United, who I think it's their worst points total after 4 games since the first year of the Premier League. So, and I think they are very, very vulnerable to Leicester, to Crystal Palace, if they can get their act together, to Wolves, if they could get their act together, or the Europa League seems to be taking its toll. I don't think it is unimaginable at all that at the end of the season we have got a completely new team in the Champions League, because I think all of those, and I would include Arsenal in that, are vulnerable because they've got a fantastic forward line, and that might be able to score their way out of trouble. But defensively, if Unai Emery thinks you can pull a guy's shirt out so it looks like a wigwam on his back, and that's not going to result in a penalty, he's delusional.
Yeah. Right, it's the weekly, is it VAR or VAR? Tweet us at Sunday Sup, but it's the weekly VAR section or VAR section, Matt. Jack Grealish, fuming, oh dear.
Furious.
Fury. Jack Grealish had to be restrained by teammates. Villa denied yesterday an equaliser at Crystal Palace. Rightly so, I have to say. Henry Lansbury thought he had scored. Kevin Friend rules it out after a VAR call. What are your thoughts on decision, use of the technology? And we'll talk about events elsewhere, Tielemans particularly at Leicester in a moment. But let's first
I couldn't believe the
Villa decision.
I couldn't believe the decision. I mean, I wasn't watching the game live, and I'd sort of read that there was this controversy at the end, and then when I actually saw it, it's an unbelievable decision. I mean,
why is it an unbelievable decision?
In the first instance, it's not a VAR controversy because it's just rank bad refereeing.
Yeah,
it's terrible refereeing. I mean, Grealish passes the ball to his teammate. He gets nudged in the back, and Gary Cahill also, you can see, is clutching his knee because there's been contact with Cahill. I'm not claiming it was a penalty. I don't think it was a penalty. But it's just not a dive, and he's clearly continuing to try and play. I mean, he's trying to keep his balance, and he's managing to pass the ball off. That part of it's nothing to do with VAR. It's just appalling refereeing, and he seems to go for his whistle extremely quickly to stop it. And then the confusion comes with, well, why can't VAR then look at it and rule on it? and it ends up it's because obviously the referee has blown his whistle to deem to stop play before the ball's gone in the net, and you then can't re-referee the goal. But I mean, Villa are right to be furious.
Let's say we were without the technology and this incident happened Let's say without the technology and this incident happens at the start of the season as it has. Would we labour the point about whether Jack Grealish had dived or not in the decision?
Yeah,
would we have even mentioned it on the programme this morning?
I think we would.
Do you?
I don't, because like I say, I didn't see it at the time as VAR controversy.
No, it isn't.
When I first saw it, I didn't think of VAR. I just thought that's one of the worst pieces of refereeing I've seen in a long time.
That was a decision that should have gone to VAR. If the referee had let the play go, Lansbury puts the ball in the goal, and then Kevin Friend decides, you know what, I think Jack Grealish has dived. But then at least he can say to the official in the booth, was there any contact? You know, was it? Well, there was contact. Was it a dive? And clearly, it wasn't a dive. He lost his balance when he got a nudge in the back, I think, from Wilfried Zaha. And he careered into was it Gary Cahill?
Cahill.
And you could tell it was contact because Cahill went down clutching his knee.
Yeah.
So you know, that was one. I understood that referees were supposed to allow the game to develop, and then if they thought there was an issue, then it would go to VAR.
In actual fact, though, by making the Villa one a bit of a VAR controversy, I actually think you're letting Kevin Friend off the hook.
Totally.
Because people start then debating about whether VAR's right or wrong. Well, hang on, Kevin Friend's made an awful mistake
I
here.
don't see how VAR can correct that because it all happens so quickly. That's one of the reasons why I couldn't understand why Kevin Friend booked Jack Grealish, and was because you could see the momentum of the player running through. That everything happened so quickly that the slightest touch could have sent him over. So you know, whether it was intentional or unintentional, whether even somebody tackled him and got the ball, he was going to go flying because he was motoring by that stage. And I'm not even sure that VAR could pick the bones out of it in sufficient time to overturn it or whatever. I think it would have been the football equivalent of umpire's call, where you go, well, that's, you know, Kevin sees this as a dive, and so it's a dive. I really don't think that's a VAR decision. I totally agree with Matt that it was just poor refereeing.
Okay. What about the decision at Leicester? Yuri Tielemans yesterday on Callum Wilson, wasn't it? What about that decision? That's another call. That's another VAR call.
That was
uproar, according to the Mail on Sunday. VAR the joy killer, they're calling it.
That was a red card. Now it was one of those. I don't think it was a deliberate, over the top challenge. I think even Wilson said that Tielemans was just trying to protect the ball, but it turned into a dangerous challenge that could have resulted in a serious injury. And the fact that I thought that VAR was brought in to look at those kinds of challenges. Clearly, the referee has missed it because it was a red card offence, and this is what we seem to be getting in the early weeks of the season, is that there are still subjective decisions that are now not being taken by the referee; they're actually being taken by a man behind a TV screen, and we're seeing it week in, week out.
If we marked the technology out of 10 after 4 games of the season so far. What would you give it? I'd give it 2.
I'd give it 2. I was an advocate of VAR. I wanted it bringing in.
Yeah, but for you, and for
I should have been careful what I wish for because I just think it's.
Me too. 2 out of 10 is not good enough, Matt.
I think it's better than the referees. The referees are missing everything. Referees are rubbish. Again, the red card yesterday.
For a score out of 10.
But the referee. Okay, well I'll give VAR a 7, and I'll give the referees 1.
Martin, I just asked for VAR.
6.
VAR out of 10.
I'd give it 6 out of 10 because I never thought it was going to solve too much anyway. I always thought, I was never a big advocate of VAR. I was goal line technology I see. I always thought there would be problems with VAR. And one of the biggest ones is it's not actually sorting out what people hoped it was going to sort out.
Yep.
It's sorting out stuff that no one thought was a problem, like the ball accidentally hits an attacker on the arm in the penalty area. It doesn't really do much. Some beats 5 players and scores, and then it gets called back for that. That wasn't actually what anyone wanted sorted out. We weren't all up in arms about that. Diving, So yesterday at West Ham, Yarmolenko dives. There's no debate about it. There's no Jack Grealish. It could be a grey area. Did he go over easy? Was it momentum? Was it this? Was it that? The fella is as far away from any other player as I am from you now, and suddenly falls over and waves his arms about and wants a penalty. And for some reason, Paul Turney, the referee, hasn't spotted it. Because in real time you could call it, but hasn't spotted it. Now, at that point, I don't think there's a fan in the country that would not like the use of VAR to be that someone goes straight into Paul Turney's ear and says, by the way, you've missed, if we're going to use the terminology, a clear and obvious dive. So, at the next break in play or whatever, he'll walk straight over to Yarmolenko and he books him. That's what should happen, and that's what I think. That's what people thought would happen as a result of VAR. There would be more fairness in the game. You'd be able to cut out cheating. Instead, it's getting all this random stuff, you know, and like the real stuff that everyone's up in arms about. It seems to be forgotten.
So why aren't the authorities listening? But it's not just us talking about it. It's not just us talking about it every week, is it? This is every day. There's a game somewhere that has a controversial moment or a decision.
Well, why aren't they listening? I've absolutely no idea.
Not just listen to us. I mean, listen to the fans who pay good money to go and watch their teams play.
Speak to referees, and they say that that VAR is being implemented by the booking as it should be. But we've now, for example, we've got a different handball law for forwards and defenders. So we saw it at Newcastle yesterday when Schär scored the equaliser. There was a clear handball in the build-up. Not a clear handball because nobody saw it, but we saw it with the replay that the ball had hit. I can't remember. I think was it Hayden? I think it hit Hayden's arm and fell to Schär, and he's put the ball in the net. That goal, or a similar goal, was ruled out at the Etihad when Man City played Spurs a few weeks ago, and we all said that is now the letter of the law. The referee has got it right. Yesterday, how did VAR not pick that up?
But it isn't the letter of the law. That's the whole point. We have been. The interpretation of that handball law is not actually the letter of the law, because that talks about gaining an advantage with the handball, and it talks about really specific things happening. Which, if you look at the Man City goal against Tottenham, glances the fella's arm, doesn't really do much in terms of its direction. It doesn't like diverts it at a right angle. It's not like he accidentally punches it to a fellow at the far post who taps it into the net. It sort of glances off. It goes to Jesus. He has to beat about 3 people and put it in the net. If you look at what the rule says, that's not handball. That's just that comes under the old-fashioned rule of that was an accident. You know, because the advantage has got to be gained. You've got to have played a deliberate, not necessarily deliberate, but you've got to have played a part in the goal.
But they've decided that this year, if the ball
if it brushes your arm, you're not playing a part in the goal.
You're not. But
occurrence.
they decided this year that if the ball hits a player's arm and it directly leads to a goal, whether it's accidental or not, then it's going to be chalked off. Yeah, you've got, by the same instance, say for example the other week the ball had hit Skip on the arm accidentally, that wouldn't have been a penalty. So you've got two different
our interpretation of that is wrong. If you actually look at the rule, our interpretation of that is wrong. It's not handball if it hits an attacker on the arm. Certain things have got to happen. It's got to really contribute to that goal, which that little glance off, I think it was Laporte's arm, didn't it? Anyway.
Okay, 2 teams will be very happy with our extended VAR chat this morning. With Chelsea and Manchester United. Under radar, because both teams drew yesterday. Chelsea 2-0 up against Sheffield United. Manchester United drawing at Southampton. They're a goal up. That was pulled back at St Mary's yesterday, Matt. Let's talk Chelsea first, and let's assess Chelsea's start. They won at Norwich last week, of course. Lampard's first win in the Premier League as a manager with Chelsea. But yesterday they did blow it.
Yeah, they did blow it. I think it's what a lot of us thought it would be. It's clearly very much a work in progress in terms of everything, in terms of the young players, in terms of Lampard himself as a manager of Chelsea. I think he'd be honest enough to say that. They're playing some nice stuff. I mean, they're playing you know, in games, they're playing a really good 45 minutes here, they're playing a really good 60 minutes here, but they're really vulnerable as well, really vulnerable, and they're getting caught out for that all over the place. And I mean, at the moment, they could get, you don't know what you're going to get with them at all. No. You really don't. I mean, you turn up to games and they could get beaten by anyone, and yet at some point they'll probably blow a team away as well, because it will all come into one game for them rather than patches. And it's going to take a lot of patience. It's going to take a lot of patience from everyone around Chelsea, because they're going to be inconsistent and they're going to be a bit hot and cold through matches and through periods of the season. And they've got a tough period coming up after the international break now. They go to Wolves, Valencia at home in the Champions League, and then Liverpool at home. So it's not getting any easier. No. But there's certainly cause for optimism in there. And Tammy Abraham's doing really well. Mason Mount's doing really well. They are playing some nice football. Weirdly as well, given that, you know, they've only won one game out of 4, there's also quite a nice atmosphere around the place, which had got very toxic last year. But for that to last, it's going to take a lot of patience.
Yeah, OK. And Manchester United, Simon, you've written about Pogba this morning on the back page of the Sunday Mirror. You say he will stay long term at Manchester United. But what the work in progress that Matt's just talked about at Chelsea, is Man United, do we really call that a work in progress?
I think it has to be. Certainly this season, it's Solskjaer's first full season in charge. So
you're giving him a season off?
I think after what's gone on since Alex Ferguson retired, I think that's what United have got to do. They've got to bite the bullet and allow a manager to remould and rebuild the team. Because United have lost their identity, and Solskjaer is trying to get that back. The problem they've got at the moment is they're little bit of a one-trick pony in that they can be a lethal counter-attacking team. The problem is when they're challenged to break a team down, and they're playing some nice football in patches. The problem is they can't put in a 90-minute performance at the moment. As far as Solskjaer is concerned, I think they're now at the point they've allowed him to begin the job. I think they've got to give him at least a year, if not 2, to try and finish it. I think Solskjaer is under that impression as well, that he's been given a big task, and I think he believes that he will be given the time to see that through. Yeah,
he's got some young players in there, particularly up front. Can he rely on them? Of course, he's Sanchez out the door this week to Inter Milan. Lukaku already on his way, but up front, of course, a little bit of experience with Martial. I guess he's been at Manchester United long enough. Rashford, of course. Is he entitled to expect more from Rashford, Jesse Lingard, those types of, that profile of footballer?
I think they're good players. I think they're very good players, and they're very quick and pace, fighting the life out of defenders. So I think that will come good. I think they will come good. But again, it's the Chelsea thing. They're a work in progress at the moment. You know, you can look at the midfield and, you know, think there's flaws there maybe. That you can look at Rashford and say, does he score as many goals? But see, the thing is, there is a the fashion these days is you get a good young centre forward and you play him on the wing, and he learns his game on the wing, and then he comes back in as centre forward, and you think, look at Tammy Abraham. Tammy Abraham went on loan and played as a centre forward, didn't he? Yep. Comes back in. Suddenly he's scoring goals. You know, I'm not sure whether having a young centre forward as your winger actually helps long term. And you might be better off going on loan. You might be better off going somewhere and playing your position, because it's the hardest position on the field.
The difference, I just think, between United and Chelsea, obviously, though, Chelsea can't sign players. So Lampard.
I mean,
Lampard, you've got to give him time. Absolutely. Because he can't bring anyone into the squad. Solskjaer, I mean, they've signed world record defender. They've spent a lot of money. You've got to get some results on that. I don't think you can give the guy a free pass when they've given him the amount of money they've given him.
No, last word, Simon.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think Solskjaer's policy is going to build a team around younger players, and everybody sort of harks back to the class of '92. But what people forget is the likes of Beckham, Neville, Scholes. They were brought into a team that had Eric Cantona in it, that had Roy Keane in it. And I think that's what United's problem at the moment is, that they've got players who are looking after themselves, and they lack a little bit of, for want of a better word, a little bit of leadership on the pitch, and I think that's something that has got to be addressed.
Yeah, it certainly does, because Manchester United and Chelsea need to start pulling some results together to climb up the table. OK, next up we're going to talk about this story. Ollie Holt's written about it in his column this morning in the Mail on Sunday. £10,000 for a parking spot at Bury. What's all that about? We'll tell you next. Welcome back with us this morning, Martin Samuel, Simon Mullock and Matt Law. Martin, before I go to the papers again, you're not happy with the catering?
No, look, we could bring a table to order with this, couldn't we? I mean, it must have been left over from last week.
Judge.
Yeah, the judge. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway,
should have told you before the programme started. That's just decoration.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they're not real.
I think there's a hidden microphone in there.
Yeah, probably is. OK, We'll get that sorted out for the next time you're on. OK, let's just remind you what's in the papers this morning. Just perfect. Liverpool 13 league wins in a row yesterday, but was it perfect? Because the back page of the Sunday People, Sadio Mane, we're going to talk about him a little bit later on. Fury was substituted yesterday, 6 minutes from time. Didn't seem very happy with Mo Salah and his decision making on field. Yesterday, Graham Souness, he didn't seem very happy this morning in his Sunday Times column. He says that Daniel Levy got to start delivering at Tottenham. He's got to start winning trophies, as does his manager Mauricio Pochettino. You blew it. We've just been talking about Chelsea 2-0 up yesterday, drew with Sheffield United at Stamford Bridge. Simon's story in the Sunday Mirror this morning about Paul Pogba's contract. He won't extend it at Manchester United. He still wants to leave, despite Ole Gunnar Solskjaer saying he's staying beyond the European deadline. Sam Wallace will coming onto this story in a few moments' time. Bobby Duncan at Liverpool, youth team footballer, had some first-team experience on tour. His agent was wrong to go public with bullying claims. That's Sam's column. We'll talk about it in a moment. But we will discuss Bury first of all, because, of course, they went out of business this week. I fear for our game. That's Gareth Southgate on the back of The Sun this morning. And Ollie Holt's column, £10,000 for a parking space at Bury. Why it's time to start protecting our assets and our game. That's Ollie's column this morning. Martin, you've written about Bury too this week. What are your thoughts on what's happened at Gig Lane over the past few days? Because we've talked extensively on this programme about the issues that Bury have had. But what can the game do in the future to stop situations like this occurring?
Well, that's the thing, you see, because it's not about the last few days. It's about a long period of mismanagement and a state of sort of benign neglect that a lot of the lower league clubs exist in. As once again referring to Steve Parish, it was a very sensible observation this week that, Bury was bought for £1. So, people talk about like the fit and proper persons test, or owners and directors test, as I think it's now called. But by the time your club is worth £1, you've gone a bit beyond the owners and directors test, because you are not going to, we can say, we need good people running football clubs, but what good person are you going to get for £1? The club's worth £1. You're not going to get some very, very super reliable businessman come in and buy Bury for £1. So things have got to start a lot earlier than that. It's not just about fit and proper persons, but it's about running football clubs in a responsible way, because all of this, you can pass all the legislation you want, but the Football League can't stop Bury. Stuart Day, the former chief executive of Bury, said that Stuart Day, the previous owner, at one stage they had 9 strikers. What the Football League meant to do about that? Manchester City have got, 3, 4 strikers? Bury had 9 strikers. So unless you're saying that the Football League has got to dive in every 2 minutes and say, you can't buy him, that's ridiculous. You've already got 2 strikers, or you can't redevelop that standard. You don't want. It's not the Football League's job to micromanage clubs like this. So there is a lot of people. There's a lot of emotion around all of this, but I fail to see what the Football League can do about a lot of the fundamental problems at these clubs that come from mismanagement, because you're allowed to run a business badly. There's no law against running a business badly as long as it's not fraudulent. And that's what has happened with Bury. It's a badly run business. So was Bolton. So was Oldham.
They're not alone.
They're not alone, but I don't quite see how much the authorities can actually do in terms of stopping it happening. because people are allowed to be bad at business.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who are. Could we look at, say, the German model, fan-owned influence, 51-49, 51% of the club belongs?
We could, but I don't know how you are going to bring that in at this juncture.
Yeah,
you know,
the horse has bolted.
Correct. You know, you're going to have to kind of get rid of 100.
But we need to look at we need to look at some answers. That may not be the correct answer for English football. I accept that. It's just an idea that kind of works elsewhere, or certainly is institutionalised elsewhere. But we actually have to come up with some proper potential answers.
We do, but I mean, I was in the gathering we had with Southgate this week when he was talking about the first game that he went to was at Gig Lane. He lived in Bury briefly when he was a young boy, and the first game he went to was Bury v Watford, and the sort of the larger point that Southgate made was that this could be the beginning, because he fears, and I think a lot of us fear, that football in the lower leagues is going to continue to struggle, simply because they just don't earn enough money at that level. Certainly, we've seen it with Bury and Bolton, and as Martin said, the next club that could be in trouble. I'm not saying it will be as bad as this, but the noises coming out of Oldham aren't very encouraging either at the moment.
Yeah, one or two other clubs as well, aren't there? There are few rumours in the game at the moment that others may be going the same way.
Yeah, I mean, for example, I live in the next town along from Bury, and there's been a real cloud over the town, as you can imagine, this week. But this is a football club that was attracting crowds of 3,000. So maybe the time it has passed. The fans fans needed to kind of attend in bigger numbers. People who aren't even interested in football this week, that all they've been talking about in the area is the demise of Bury. It's a proud town. The 3,000 that turn up at Gig Lane every week kind of pride themselves on the fact that they're not attracted to the glamour of Old Trafford and the Etihad, which is only 10 miles away. But the fact remains that when FC United were playing there a few years ago, they were getting crowds of 5,000-6,000, which was double what Bury were getting, and it's a horrible reality. But maybe this is the way that football is now heading. Yeah.
Sad week for fans of Bury Football Club. Let's hope they find a way to re-establish themselves, even if it is at a lower level, and they can find someone to run their club properly and within the regulations, the Football League regulations, if they can find a way to get back there one day. I'd like to talk about Sam's column as well in the Sunday Telegraph this morning. This reflects on, or talks about Bobby Duncan, the young Liverpool player, and his agent who went public this week about the player's mental condition and various other issues and frustrations that he has with Michael Edwards, the club's technical director at Liverpool, all denied by Liverpool, I have to say. But why did his agent, Saif Ruby, go public with this statement?
Well, one thing I would start by saying is that Liverpool have said, and I think we should take seriously too, that they're taking seriously the claim that he's got mental health difficulties and that he feels he's been bullied. They're not just wiping that away and pretending nothing's happening. And I think we've got to be a bit careful around that, because obviously there are issues going on around this lad. Bringing it into the public domain when it didn't need to be was the very surprising thing about it. And also, it felt like the issue itself was almost being weaponised against Liverpool. Whether it was or not, we don't know. But that's how it looked in terms of bringing out this statement to say, look at what Liverpool, let this lad go, look at what they're doing to him, aren't they terrible? It all felt like it should have been done in-house. Very surprising move by the PR agent, and I'd be very interested to know, I mean, I doubt whether we will get to know of how Bobby Duncan feels about it all, because now he's right in the middle of this whole storm. And it doesn't seem to have done anyone any good, because it's not going to get the lad his move. it's certainly not done the PR agent any good.
Well, you've got this classic line from Sam here. It says that the intermediary, a chap called Safe Ruby, he might be the first self-styled public relations expert obliged to delete his own Twitter account in the wake of his own advice. Who's ever done that?
You really, yeah. I was going to say, if you're asking about Twitter, you're really looking at the wrong person there, aren't you? So,
yeah. But you get, you know the point
I'm
Sam's
aware that
making.
it exists, and I'm aware that that wasn't the smartest use of it.
Where do they go from here with Bobby Duncan? He's an 18-year-old kid.
And that, I think that's the whole point of it. I think Bobby Duncan himself put a tweet out saying, all I want to do is play football, which, is probably the reality of it all. I think the problem that he's got is that he's at the European champions. How on earth can Jurgen Klopp justify kind of playing an 18-year-old youth team player ahead of the likes of Firmino, Mane, Salah?
You can't, but the target is, if you're Bobby Duncan, is if you're playing better than Mo Salah, you're in.
Well, exactly, but he's got to play better than Mo Salah. And I was speaking to Robbie Fowler this week, who was at kind of a similar juncture that Bobby Duncan is at now. And Robbie was talking about he was given he was on the bench for the first time for an FA Cup tie, and he thought, that's it, I've made it. It won't be long now before I get my first team debut. He didn't appear on the bench again. He didn't get on that day, and he didn't appear on the bench again for about 4 months. And in the end, he had to wait until the following October before he got his Liverpool debut. And Robbie Fowler was probably even more highly rated as an 17-year-old than Bobby Duncan is now. He had to be patient and bide his time. Robbie Fowler was at a club that had Ian Rush scoring goals for fun. When he got his debut at Fulham, he scored a goal, and he never looked back. He scored 18 goals that season, and that's what it's about. It's about, at that age, waiting for your chance, and then when it comes along, taking it.
The frustration doesn't seem to be that he thinks he should be playing for Liverpool. He wants to leave, and he feels he's being denied a move.
Yeah, sure. OK, good stuff, guys. OK, next up, we're going to talk international football. We'll talk about England and the squad announcement. No Kyle Walker in it. Why not? We'll tell you next. Guys, do we have the TV in on the halfway line? Does the referee trot over?
I think the
Let's
answer
take
is
Cameron's thunder away from him.
I think do it differently. Each manager gets 2 challenges, and that's the only time you use VAR.
Yep.
I'd agree with that. I mean, I'm a big NFL fan, and it's actually part of the event when a flag's thrown and a coach challenges a refereeing decision.
Couple of challenges.
I don't like that. I've never liked the couple of challenges idea, I must confess. Go and have a look at it yourself. Yeah, go and have a look at it yourself. But I don't think anything actually solves it. I don't think there is. I don't think that's what I always thought with it. It's not a panacea. It will be. All it's done. We had this set of problems, and some of those problems have now gone away, but now we've got this set of problems, and a lot of those are new, and just replace one set of problems with a new set of problems. Yeah. It just depends which set of problems you prefer.
Yeah, OK. Let's talk England's squad. Let's talk about the problems that Gareth Southgate has got picking that squad. I was pretty surprised that Kyle Walker's been left out of that squad, because his form undoubtedly tailed off towards the end of last season, when he was probably lucky to stay in the squad. This season, I think it's probably the best I've seen Kyle Walker play, and he's out of the squad.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of surprise in Manchester as well, certainly on the blue side of Manchester, because he started the season so well. We spoke to Southgate in the week, and he was saying that it was to look at other options, other right-back options. He brought Aaron Wan-Bissaka in. And you wonder, I mean, Southgate said that the door wasn't closed for Kyle Walker, but you think that after that decision, it's pretty difficult to find a way to see how he can come back. He did have a difficult time in the Nations League game against Holland. Maybe he's paid the price for that. But yeah, I mean, he started the season so well for City. He's keeping Cancelo out, who's a player that kind of arrived in a deal, again, worth £60 million. So he's certainly impressing his club manager, but it looks as though he's done something wrong in Gareth Southgate's eyes.
The players at Southgate, Wan-Bissaka, of course, at Manchester United, has he justified his place in the full England squad? So with his performances so far in a United shirt.
Yeah, and also going back to last season, his performances for last season, I think, justify a lot. We're strangely really strong at right back, aren't we?
Yeah.
Probably will. If there's a World Cup for right backs, you know, we'd win it. You got Trippier.
Careful, don't get carried away. Southgate's been talking about overconfidence in the under-21 side.
We've got a lot of right back options, so I don't blame him at all for wanting to look. I can only think that if he's thinking that maybe Trent Alexander-Arnold is now going to be his number one right back, that there's not much currency in having Kyle Walker in a squad and not playing. That he'd be better off to have one of the younger options to have a look at him and have them around the England camp looking forward to next summer. That's just my theory behind it.
Yeah, because I think, you know, it's only, a year ago that we had Kyle Walker in the centre of England's defence, didn't we, with the World Cup?
Yeah, but that's
so
another...
as a player, you've asked to play out of position to do you a favour because you believe tactically that is
he
the way
doesn't owe him.
forward.
I mean, he played in the World Cup. He doesn't owe him any favours, does he?
No.
The other strange one, though, is that Southgate is trying to play a possession-based game that builds from the back, and the one player that does play that system to the nth degree is Kyle Walker, which again has left me surprised that he's out of the squad.
But Southgate likes to throw in a surprise, doesn't he? He's got this about him.
He has got
England
it about him. I don't think he does it for. I don't think he does it for effect, though. I mean, I think that's just generally the way that he sees it. I share the surprise of everyone around this table about Kyle Walker, and I certainly agree. There have been times when I've looked at it and thought, no, I'm not sure Kyle Walker's in the best two right backs in the country at the moment. But funnily enough, the start of this season isn't one of them. No. You know, you're looking at that. Liverpool, they were quite worried about Trent Alexander-Arnold's form until last week's game against Arsenal, which Klopp said was the best game he'd played all season. So, you know, Wan-Bissaka, I think he looks a smashing player, but you know, if Kyle Walker had kept him out of the England team for another couple of games or whatever, I wouldn't have seen that as a terrible injustice. But you know, Gareth has done very, very well with the England team, and you got to trust him basically. And if that's his instinct, he might have seen something in Kyle Walker that none of us have noticed. He might have seen something in the Nations League that he thought, no, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. And you've got to go with that. You got to go with that. Trent Alexander-Arnold has produced more goals from the right-back position than anyone else in the country last year. Well, if Gareth Southgate likes to look at that, I can understand it.
What I wonder as well is what I think Gareth Southgate has done very well is when we talk about, you know, Tottenham maybe going a bit stale with lack of signings and things, I do think that Southgate is aware he needs to always keep it fresh. And after the World Cup, he changed it up quite a lot. None of us really would have complained after the World Cup if he didn't make any changes to his squad. And yet he made a lot of changes. He keeps regenerating it and just keeping people on their toes and keeping a fresh feel about it, which I think is positive.
Well, Trippier was out and now he's back in again, isn't he? So I don't think it necessarily means that Kyle Walker's gone. I really don't. But it's you know, it'll be interesting.
What about options elsewhere? Harry Kane struggled last week, didn't he, against Newcastle? Struggled to get a touch against Manchester City the week before, didn't
They also got to get a touch against
a few, a few people probably in single figures that day. Is there any concern over Kane's
The amount of times people...
Fitness! You thought I was going to say form.
I'll tell you what, I saw him against Villa in the first game and he looked in cracking shape.
Yeah, he did.
But physically, he looked in fantastic shape. And we were, you know, it was one of his rare summers off. I think he's only had a couple in his whole life because of the way it's gone with under-21 and senior tournaments. So I always laugh, though, when we talk about, are we worried about Harry Kane? Because
you're not worried? No.
There's nothing to worry about Harry Kane.
Mason Mount in the squad, good for him. Young player, back in the squad, of course. Gareth Southgate has called him up before. That's when he was a Derby player with Frank Lampard.
Yeah, I mean, and he's another youngster that's come through from the 21s who looks an extremely talented footballer. He's been given his chance this season with Lampard after following him back from Derby. I'm quite excited to see James Maddison in there, I've got to say. I think he's a terrific footballer. I just wonder where he would fit in with how Southgate plays, because he doesn't usually play with a what we call a traditional number 10. So that's interesting to see. If he gets into the team.
He'd like that. I mean, in an ideal world, he'd have Dele Alli in the number 10, wouldn't he? But of course, he's injured.
Correct. But it'll be interesting to see whether Maddison gets a chance and whether and how Southgate gets him into the team, because I just think he can bring that creativity that maybe England have missed in midfield.
Yeah. What else can we look forward to about this squad, this team this week?
You caught me there, to be quite honest with you. I mean, there's a lot.
Got to put the Nations League. Got to put the Nations League behind us, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Very far behind.
How long did it take to get over that?
Day. 24 hours. Yeah. I'm not even sure that, to be quite honest with you. Maybe by the end of the evening.
Yeah, I was checking out my hotel that night virtually, but.
Look, I think. Look, there's definitely. We've just talked about them. There's exciting players in there. Mason Mount is a very exciting talent. Whether he can get him into the team to have a look at him would be great. How he gets to James Maddison. And Harry Winks is an interesting one. Harry Winks, I think, has still only made about 3 England appearances, and yet he's still very much thought of as a possible solution to this sort of ball-playing midfielder that we need to create attacks.
It's made England interesting. That's the thing that Gareth has done. That is, it's not a tangible success like lifting a trophy or anything like that, but it is a success of sorts, because England wasn't interesting. We all know that, and you look, I think International Week, and circulation figures dropped, online figures dropped, everything dropped about it. You couldn't sell England for love nor money. Gareth has made England interesting again, because one, the football they play is interesting. It's not always successful, doesn't always work, sometimes kittens, but it's interesting. And the players that he's trying to bring through, young players that aspire technically, well, that's interesting as well. And so you do tend to go to England games now, and there's something to think about, there's something to talk about, there's something you want to see, whether it's Mason Mount or James Maddison or whoever. There's something there you're thinking, I'll be interested to see how this works, I'll be interested to see how this kid plays, I'll be interested to see how we do this or do that. And that's good. Yeah. That's good, because it'll become dull, and it's very easy for English football international football to become dull, because the more you expand the European Championships and the World Cup or whatever.
Let's not get Martin on the Nations League.
We haven't got time. The qualification is so easy now that it'll be very easy for the matches just to become a long list of glorifying friendlies.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff, guys. Let's get back to our the habitat that we usually love to talk about, which is the Premier League. Should we do that? We're going to talk about that next.
I was wondering where you were going with that, mate.
No, I don't know myself, but
something like that.
Okay, well, you've gone with chocolate brownies now, and you've had one of everything so far.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we're going to talk about Burnley, Liverpool 13 wins in a row in the league, but is everything rosy at Anfield? We'll talk about that next. Welcome back. Okay, front page of the Observer Sports section this morning. Just perfect. This reflects on Liverpool winning 13 league games in a row. You can see Salah and Firmino cuddling up to each other yesterday. But is Sadio Mane and Salah and Jurgen Klopp, are they all cuddling up to each other? Back page of the Mirror. I think everyone has seen this incident at Turf Moor yesterday when Mane was substituted about 6 minutes from the end of the game, Matt. What are your thoughts on Mane's reaction, the mouthful of verbals that he gave his manager, the surprise on the Liverpool bench because everyone was shocked by the outburst, and the reasons behind that substitution, and his obvious frustration with Mo Salah? Yeah,
it'll be interesting next time. I hope they come up with some celebration for next time Mane scores and Salah sets him up, because, I mean, the bench made me laugh, because, I mean, they were... Henderson's face just sort of dropped. You know, what on earth is this guy doing? 3-0 up and he's going nuts. But look, you can see it two ways, and time will tell whether there's actually a problem there or whether it actually reflects well on the fact that they're 3-0 up and yet it's not good enough and he wants goals. And there's clearly a bit of competition there, isn't there? They shared the golden boot last season, and it looks like there's a competition there now out of the two of them to try and outscore each other, which again can be healthy, can be unhealthy. I suspect everything will be fine. I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm not suggesting this is in the same vein, but I'm actually just trying to historically, Martin. I'm thinking,
it just struck me, Andy Cole, you don't have to get on with the guy you're working with.
Andy Cole and Teddy Sheringham couldn't stand each other.
So, but I can't remember, did we know that when they were up front together for Manchester United, or was it only afterwards that we discovered that they couldn't stand each other?
I thought it was later, but I don't think it was. I think it's been known for a long time, but I don't think it was known, say, on the night at Nou Camp in 1999.
No, that's
I
what I
don't
was
think
trying to
anyone
think.
knew that they couldn't stand each other. But
correct us if we're wrong, but it's just the mind plays tricks.
You don't have to like everybody you work with. I mean, everyone who's ever worked in an office knows that.
Let's get it all out in the open.
No, but it's true. No, I love
go
everyone
on,
I
you've
work
brought
with.
it
You know
on.
that.
You know you're going down this road.
I know. But I think that blows. It's an interesting thing with Sadio Mane because Klopp is very aware that he's got to try to protect him a little bit. He was talking about that last week after the Arsenal game, that because I think it was Jamie Carragher said, he was surprised that he played Sadio Mane, that he didn't rest him, and Klopp had a little bit of fun with that. And then said, but I did rest him. I took him off with 12 minutes to go or whatever, and he's aware that he's had no rest all summer.
So I think he was sub for the Norwich game, wasn't he? Mane was, I think, on the bench for the Norwich game.
I think he might have been at the start, but he's played him since. But that is just about not being passed to, and that sort of thing gets. I mean, if that was to become a problem, that would be something I would imagine that Jurgen Klopp would sort out very, very quickly if he thought that his strikers weren't passing to each other because they were playing for a sort of personal glory rather than the team. I don't see Jurgen Klopp as the sort of manager that stands to that, for 2 minutes longer than is necessary.
No.
So I don't see this being a problem.
No. So short term, it's 13 wins in a row for them in the Premier League. That's mighty impressive. And it's a record 13.
Yeah,
as well.
I think that breaks a record that was set by the Kenny Dalglish side, Liverpool. So yeah, they've just carried on from where they left off last season, and they in fact I think they actually look even better this year, even at this early stage of the season.
Have you seen a better combination front three? It's a very obvious front three operating in circulation. They're happy to turn up in whatever position they're on the pitch. They're on rotation. Can you think of a better front three?
I just think as a combination, they just fit absolutely perfectly. And Firmino does just such a fantastic job, kind of carrying the burden, and that often allows. I mean, I know he scored yesterday, but that often allows Salah and Mane to do what they do best. I just think it's the combination of it all. I probably haven't seen a better front three in terms of how they actually work together, and they produce goals, they produce assists. But having said that,
you'd take their three over City's front three behind the three behind Aguero. So they're slightly different system. Would you take that three?
I think it's slightly different in that the entire Liverpool team is set up behind to get those three free. I think it's slightly different in terms of City because the midfielders weigh in with more goals. I think it's pretty close, but I think you're going to have to go some way to beat that three that Liverpool have got.
Any one of those three could play as the centre forward. That's the key to it. That any one of those three could be the number 9. Whereas you look at other very good threes that you've seen in like recent years, in Premier League years. You think of Chelsea's front three under Mourinho the first time, where you've got Didier Drogba and you've got Cole and Robben.
I think Damien Duff.
And Damien
Duff still there then?
Yeah, but they weren't three strikers.
No.
Didier Drogba was always the striker. He's never going to be out in the wing, and Joe Cole's going to be in the middle. These guys, it's so flexible. Any one of them can be the centre forward. Any one of them can be the wide player.
The frightening thing there at the moment is I think we all hoped at the start of the season that while we all expected it to be a Liverpool-Man City title race again, we hoped that some of the others might get a little bit closer. I think they're going to be further away, these two.
Further away.
Yeah, I think they're miles ahead
we
of us.
knew, and everyone knew at the start of the season, you can't let those two get away.
No.
Yeah, you'll have to be neck and neck with them. You'll have to start. Yeah. You'll have to start the season.
I mean, in
strong.
terms of all the rest going for them, it's already over, and I think the gap from the two to the rest is going to be bigger than last season.
Well, I was at the Etihad yesterday, and 69 seconds in, City score, and you just start preparing your match report because you know that is pretty much game over.
It is even more
Is that a worry for the game, or do we accept and applaud? Look, you guys have got the best recruitment, you've got the most money, you've got the most history, the pedigree, you've got the best stadiums, training facilities. So you stock your squad with 25 elite, borderline world-class footballers, which is what City and Liverpool have got now.
Doesn't worry me. Doesn't worry me at all, because everything in football is cyclical, and I do not see. I think Liverpool win the league this year. If I had to have a bet, and I think
win it today. Yeah.
I think Liverpool might edge it, and so that would be new for the Premier League. So that's different. So you know that's great, but also Guardiola is going to leave one day. Klopp is going to leave one day. Certain players are going to be too old, then you've got to replace them. And if what has happened with Manchester United teaches you anything, is that nothing's forever.
Yep.
Ferguson left Manchester United, and we thought, oh yeah, but they've got advantages of financial fair play. They've got the advantages of being Manchester United. You know, they've given this new guy 6 years ago. They'll just carry on like this didn't steamroll everything, and instead they haven't been near the title since. So. That could happen to City, that could happen to Liverpool. This is a moment in time.
We're off to see the... Sorry, Simon, I'm just going to finish on North London Derby. We're off to see the also-rans this afternoon, aren't we? Arsenal, Tottenham. So, what are they chasing? Third and fourth?
They're chasing top four, for sure.
Yeah.
They're chasing third and fourth. I mean, and that is going to end up being a really interesting, because I agree with Martin, you could easily have a Leicester in there, you could have someone come out of the pack, because they're all vulnerable. You're going to have a top two title race, which I think will be fascinating, and then a very interesting race for the other two top four positions, of which Arsenal and Tottenham will be heavily involved. So today is a huge game.
What do you think will happen today, Simon?
Well, given Tottenham have got such a poor record at the Emirates, you would think that it's set up for at least Arsenal getting a point. I've just got a feeling that Spurs will kind of come out today and produce a poor performance that we've not seen for a while. If you look even back to last season, their league form, I think they've got 15 points from the last 15 games, which isn't great for a team of Tottenham's calibre, but I think this could be the game that really kickstarts their season.
Yeah, OK. Certainly a big game this afternoon, the North London derby this afternoon. It's Arsenal against Tottenham. OK, that's all we've got time for today. Thanks very much for your company this morning.